Hello, my name is Carol Romero, and I'm responding to Session 2 Adoption Curve presentation. This I found really interesting just because of the chart and how it talks about the different ways and generations and the way that technology is diffused throughout. I find this a lot in my own family because my oldest sibling is 17 years older than me, and then I have 4 other siblings, and then my closest is 10 years older than me, and then I came 10 years later. And so we have generation X, Y, and Z in our family, and so it's really interesting to see like the technology I was born with and like grew up with as opposed to like what my oldest sister grew up with. And so even recently she has asked me how to like start using Twitter, and she asked me like, well, what do you use Pinterest for, and like what is Tumblr, and what's the difference between Facebook and Instagram. And it's just been really interesting seeing her take on like different technologies. And I also see that in not only age gaps, but she used to live overseas, and so seeing the way that affects like not only your age but where you were raised, how that affects which generation and which like curve that you're in. And so in the first question it says, how do your differences in adoption category affect your communication with each individual? And I would say that this plays a lot in my family life, not only because of my older siblings, but because I have lots of younger nieces and nephews. And so I see the way that each of us communicate so differently. And so like my oldest sister, she writes emails, she doesn't text. She likes to leave voicemails instead of texting, and she likes FaceTime, which is like face-to-face communication, but she doesn't like the shortcuts. Recently though, she's figured out that the texting is actually super helpful and can help make those shortcuts. The next question, how does each individual, including you, operate and respond in our tech-centric world? I would say that the biggest difference in this question is between me and my parents. I love technology. I think it's super helpful. I'm super thankful for it because without it, I wouldn't be able to attend online school and finish my degree, while my parents are very suspicious of it. It's a very new thing. They are in the category of, I believe it's laggards, the ones who are very suspicious of it at first, but they eventually accept it and adopt it. And so another example of this is my dad. He owns a construction company, and he has recently started a new branch of his company but refuses to start a website for it because he thinks that the way business is done is the way that he used to do it in the 80s, when people would hear by word of mouth how good he is, and that's how he would get business. But now if you don't have a website, your business isn't really viewed as credible. And so trying to convince him that that's the new way that business is done has been a very interesting dichotomy between me and him, because I see technology as essential when he sees it as a nuisance and something to be afraid of. But I do believe that eventually he will get a website and see how his sales and markets profit from that. So that will be interesting. The third question, why do you place each individual, including you, in a respective category? So innovators, I would say, are my older siblings, who are people who adopted it first, kind of new to it, haven't grown up with it. I would say that I am an innovator and a digital native, meaning that I have basically grown up with technology. I got my first flip phone when I was in the 8th grade, but I grew up with iPods and iTouches and stuff and learning how to use that technology relatively early on in my life. I've heard that my generation is the last with physical baby pictures, which is really interesting because a lot of my nephews and nieces don't have physical pictures of themselves. They're all on their phones, which is really interesting because what happens if you lose your phone and your pictures are gone? I think it's a really interesting way that we place value in digital hard copies instead of physical hard copies, even though physical can be more reliable than digital in a lot of ways, especially if your phone crashes, if your iCloud fills up. It can be really expensive too. So the last question is, if you could, what would you change your category to? I think I'm pretty comfortable being a digital native who's also a pretty high innovator, someone who has grown up with it, is comfortable with it. The thing that I find most interesting about his idea of diffusion and the way that technology weaves its way into society is the way that each generation reacts so differently to it, and I've described that in the way that my family dynamics work, but you can see it in almost anything. And if you continued your family circle, like I probably won't be able to understand everything that my great-great-granddad tries to show me, and my great-great-grandmother would have no idea how to use any of the stuff that I use on a daily basis. So I just think it's really interesting the way that things have evolved and things have changed over time. if I were to change myself, I don't think I would, honestly. I'm really thankful for technology. Again, like I said, it's allowing me to get my degree online, and that's something that I didn't think was going to happen for a while. So, yeah, thank you. Bye.